Hello, I'm Beauty Bragg, a program officer in the Division of Research Programs at the NEH. Thank you for joining me for this webinar about the NEH Summer Stipends programs focused on strategies for writing a stronger application. While these thoughts are probably also useful for other NEH programs, this presentation is focused on prospective summer stipends applicants and those who advise them. Closed captioning is available for this webinar. Click the captioning box on the lower right-hand corner of your screen. This is our agenda for the session. I'll give a brief overview of the summer stipend program, describe the review process, the application format, the application components, the review criteria, and offer some tips for writing a good application, including a list of things to avoid. A lot of this information is on the NEH website. On the Summer Stipend Program page, you'll find the guidelines, formally called the Notice of Funding Opportunity. This document is a bit lengthy and bureaucratic, but it's worth reading. It describes who is eligible and who is not, the application process, what an application should include, and how applications are reviewed. On the program page, you'll also find sample applications, examples of how successful applicants made a case for their project. Here's a brief summary of the Summer Stipends program. This program supports individual scholars pursuing advanced research in the humanities. The awards are for $6,000 for 2 months, usually but not necessarily in the summer. Projects are eligible at any stage of development, but many of our grantees are at the beginning of a project, just laying the foundation, or at the end of a project, finishing their writing. Applications from people at all institutions are welcome, but like all NEH programs, we especially encourage applications from independent scholars, from faculty at Hispanic serving institutions, historically Black colleges and universities, tribal colleges and universities, as well as community colleges. This year's deadline is September 22nd, 2021. Awards will be made in March 2022, and the performance period can start May 1st, 2022 or later. As you'll see here, over the last 5 years, we've received an average of 837 applications and made 83 awards for a funding ratio of about 10%. You shouldn't let these numbers discourage you, though. You can't get a grant unless you apply, but do be aware of the level of competition in this program. Our goal here today is to help you write a good application. One key to writing a strong application is understanding how it will be reviewed. That will give you a sense of the audience for your application. You should write your application understanding who will read it and what they will be looking for. All applications for NEH grants go through a peer review process, which has several stages laid out here. The first and most important stage is the peer review panel. At this stage, we group together applications by disciplines and topics, and then look for experts in those areas. Our aim is to assign applications to the most sympathetic possible reviewers. You should assume that your reviewers have some background in your field, but do not know as much about your topic as you do. I'll say a bit more about this in a while. The summer stipend review panels are made up of 3 scholars. They read the applications, write comments, and post a rating. Summer stipends panelists do not meet in person. NEH staff review all the comments from panelists and recommends which applications should be supported. Those recommendations are considered by the National Council on the Humanities, which is made up of 26 humanists, scholars or otherwise, nominated by the President and approved by the Senate. The Council makes recommendations to the endowment's chairman, who takes all of this into consideration and makes the final funding decision. It's a long process, but it allows for a rich review. The peer review panelists' comments are the foundation throughout this process. After grants are announced, applicants can request comments from their evaluators. Not every funder offers that kind of support, but we see it as a service to our applicants to give feedback on their applications from 3 very expert readers. Our panelists are incredibly generous with their comments. We ask our peer reviewers to use a defined set of criteria when evaluating applications. Applicants should keep these criteria in mind as they are writing their applications. They're listed in the guidelines, which is another reason to read the guidelines carefully. Print them out and keep them on your desk as you prepare your application. The most important criterion is the first one, significance. This is where you tell us why the project is important, how it will change the way scholars or other readers understand the topic or do their own research. Are the research questions coherent? The second criterion is about the quality of the application. Is it clear? Does it describe well the project and its goals? It should make sense to non-specialists. The third is about method. Is it clear what you're going to do? Will your method answer your research questions? Tell us what you're going to do during the grant period. Describe in as much detail as possible what you'll do and what you hope to achieve. The fourth criterion is about your qualifications or preparation to do the project. Why are you the right person for this work? The fifth criterion is about the likelihood that you will complete the project, not necessarily during the grant period. Here is also where you will describe how your work will reach the audience or audiences for your research. The application requirements are pretty straightforward. The application is a relatively short document. It involves a 3-page narrative, 1-page bibliography, 2-page CV, and the names of 2 references. These documents should work together, and you might think of them as separate chapters of the same book. They should reinforce each other, making the case for your project. The narrative itself should include several components. First, a discussion of the project's significance. This is crucial. You should discuss the project's scholarly context. What is the most important previous work on the topic? It should describe your contribution to the scholarly discussion. Will it build on or disagree with previous scholarship or provide new interpretation? What are your research questions? You might discuss the audience for your project and explain how it will benefit from your work. You should also talk about the method. How will you answer your research questions? How much have you done on the project? What will you do during the grant period? It's what we call the work plan. Give us as much detail as you can. This is only a 2-month grant, but it is helpful to know how these 2 months fit into the larger trajectory of your project. Again, tell us why you're the right person to do this project. Discuss your previous research and publication record, language skills, access to necessary archives, and things like this. Tell us, excuse me, tell us how you will disseminate the results of your research. Will it be a book or an article? If it's a book, maybe include a brief outline. Have you talked with the publisher? It's not necessary, but if you have, it's helpful for evaluators to know that. You'll be asked to do all of this in 3 pages. It's tight, but you can do it. Look at the guidelines because they give you a helpful outline of what the narrative should include. Our website also offers samples of previously successful applications to give you a sense of how someone else made a case for their project. As your faculty development or grant office people will tell you, you should think of grant seeking as a multi-year process. Think about your planned research in the longer trajectory of your career. Anticipate research leave or sabbatical several years ahead of time. The grant process is lengthy and you may not get a grant the first time you apply, so you should apply early and often. Here are several things you can do to lay a good foundation for a grant application. First, make sure that you're applying to the right program, that you are eligible and that your project fits. The NEH website has information, including the guidelines for each program. If you're not sure where your application fits, please contact a program officer so that they can help you think about that. You would submit your application through a portal called grants.gov. It's worth checking out ahead of time so that you know how the application process will work. You'll need to set up an individual registration. Your grants office deals with grants.gov all the time, so they can help you navigate it. But one caution is that they cannot submit the application for you. Grants.gov also has a good help desk. As I said several times before, the program guidelines, also known as the Notice of Funding Opportunity, which are posted on the NEH website, contain a lot of guidance for you in this regard. They discuss eligibility, application elements, and the review process. The website also has samples of previously successful applications. Don't use them as a model, but as an example of how someone else made their case for the project, made a case for their project. They can help you think about structure and form. Finally, talk to program officers. That's what we're here for. Ask questions, discuss ideas. Because we get so many applications, we can't read drafts for the Summer Stipends program, but we are happy to answer questions. And just a note here about NEH staff. Since the endowment is a federal agency, you may assume that all the staff are federal bureaucrats. And to some extent we are, but endowment staff are also scholars, many with faculty experience and research experience. We find that these experiences help us immensely. They help us to see our job as supporting scholarly engagement with the humanities. We do this because we believe in the humanities and in scholarship. If you take nothing else away today, know that NEH staff are happy to talk to you by phone or email. We want to be your allies. Making your case. The application is a tricky document. It's an entirely different genre from a journal article or a book proposal. Most of us were not taught how to write them in graduate school. So we suggest you think of this as a rhetorical enterprise, making a case for your project. Start with the evaluation criteria. I listed them on a previous slide. They're also in the guidelines. The reviewers use those to assess your application. You might even explicitly address them in your narrative. The project is significant because, or I will disseminate the project in this way. As I said before, for almost all NEH grant programs, the most important criteria is significance. Tell the evaluators why it's important and how it will change the field. You might start by thinking about the target audience for your book. Who will read it? Scholars? In what field? How will it change the way they understand the topic or how they do their own research? As part of making a case for your project's significance, put it in a larger context. Explain how your work fits in with other work in the field that has addressed the same subject. It shouldn't be a full literature review, but show evaluators that you know about the other work being done on your topic. Emphasize what is unique about your project and how it will enhance scholarship in the field. Less well-known individuals, movements, or subjects will require you to explain their importance. Our panelists often read 30 applications. They will give your application more attention if you intrigue them. Make them want the answers to the questions you're asking. Help them feel your passion for the topic. The most intriguing projects pose important questions, use unique research materials, and have fresh, interesting approaches to their subjects. On the other hand, don't oversell it. Panelists will not be convinced by this project will transform all scholarship in the humanities. If you're revising your dissertation, tell us what is new. We will not support small-scale revisions, but we will support projects that significantly expand on a dissertation or take the previous project in a new direction. Be clear about what you're going to do in the grant period. It's what we call a work plan. I'm going to spend 2 months working in libraries, won't cut it. A better formulation is, I'm going to spend the second month of my stipend term working in the Atlanta Life Insurance Company records at the Fulton County Public Library. I have been in contact with the librarians there and know what's in the collection. Panelists are not convinced by fishing expeditions. Also, be realistic about what you're going to do in the grant period. Evaluators, who are fellow scholars, can be skeptical when an applicant promises to write a whole monograph in a year. Think carefully about your audiences for the application. They are panelists who are faculty like most of you, as well as NEH staff and members of the National Council on the Humanities. All of these folks have some background in the humanities, but in a variety of fields. Your application must inform each of these audiences effectively about your project, no matter how far away it is from their own interests. They need to be able to understand clearly what you want to do, why it is important, and that you know what you're doing. Your project can target specialists, but generalists need to be able to understand why the project would be significant to those specialists, even if it's not important to them. Make it easy on your readers. As I said, our panelists often have 30 applications to read, which can be daunting. They will like you and your application more if you make it easy on them. Don't hide your topic or your thesis. Avoid allusions that would be obvious only to specialists in the field. Limit jargon, which often puts off our panelists. If possible, address the criteria explicitly. They are key. We ask our panelists to consider them and them only when reading an application. It might feel clunky, but say, this project is significant because, or I will disseminate this research this way. That will wave a flag that evaluators will find helpful. You should also strive to balance abstraction and precision. While making broad claims for your project's significance, provide an example or two to show how your argument will work, perhaps drawing on data that you've already gathered. If you're using some theory, explain what it means and why you're using it. If you're using case studies, explain why you're using these particular cases. This is a way to make your application not only much more understandable, but also more credible and interesting to your readers. Give the evaluators confidence that you know what you're doing. Show them that you know your topic, the other literature on the topic, and your sources. Show them that you know what needs to be done to bring the project to a successful conclusion. Finally, and this is hard, but anticipate concerns that a panelist might raise and answer them. Panelists may ask, why is this question important? Why this case study and not another? Can this scholar really do the planned work in the performance period? Answer those questions before they ask them. If you've been working on a project for a while, you know the potential pitfalls. Anticipate panelists by raising those concerns and addressing them yourself. The NEH is a bureaucracy, and bureaucracies pay attention to details. Your application will be stronger if you pay attention to details too. So draft your application early. Don't wait until the last minute. That could be apparent in the quality of your application. Get comments from colleagues or mentors, especially those who don't know the details of your subfield. The more non-specialist eyes you can get on your draft, the better. Make sure that your bibliography is up to date. Panelists often look at the bibliography to make sure that the applicant knows the literature on their topic. And don't submit your application in the last hour before the deadline. You may have technical issue with your application at grants.gov, and you want to have time to fix them and make sure that you've been able to include all the required supporting material. Proofread. Don't let your wonderful ideas be overwhelmed by silly spelling errors and common mistakes. And make sure that you're sending us an application designed for the NEH. Don't send us an application that is written for some other funders. It does happen. Finally, talk with your letter writers. The more they know about your project, or the better they can be as advocates for your work. Ask them to focus their letters on your project and its significance, not on you. You might even send them the criteria. Ask them to explain why the project is important. If your project spans disciplines, literature and art, for example, It would be great to have letters from scholars in both fields. We will often have panelists that say a letter explains a project better than the application, and this is not a good thing. You can prevent that by having your references read and comment on your application before you submit it. In conversations with colleagues, some common errors have been observed. Here are some of the more common ones. One thing we see is that applicants have not read the guidelines. Those applications don't understand what we do and don't fund, or what applications should include. Too often we get generic applications as opposed to ones written for NEH programs. The biggest flaw in unsuccessful applications is not making a case for the project's significance. Applicants need to show readers why their work will be important. Reviewers want to see that you have an argument and that you are engaging the current literature on your topic. Often, applications will argue for a project's significance by noting a gap in the scholarship. That's not enough. Tell us the payoff in filling that gap. How will that change the audience's understanding of the topic? Also, too many applications omit a discussion of their methodology. We want to know how you're going to make your argument and why it's important, but we also need to see that you're how you're going to make it. So we ask that you discuss your method. Tell us why you've chosen that method and that you know how to use it. Identify your case studies. Perhaps include something that you've discovered in your research to date. Another factor that we see is applications that forget to include a work plan or offer a vague one. Make it clear what you are going to do in the grant period and how it will contribute to the project's goals. If you are doing archival work, show that you know what you'll be looking for and that you will be able to access it. Reviewers are suspicious of fishing trips. Your plans can change, but a developed work plan gives your evaluators confidence that you know what you're doing and how you will do it. We often get applications that use a lot of jargon, and that turns our panelists off. We like to see that our applicants are up on the latest theories, but we also want to see that they can communicate their work clearly. Bear in mind that the evaluators for your application may not know the in-group language of your subfield. If you are using an esoteric term, you may want to define it or even use a different word. We get lots of applications from junior faculty who are revising their dissertations into a book. Weak applications do not explain how the book will move beyond the dissertation. Tell us what you're adding and how it will be different. Sometimes the reference letters are not useful. They are unfamiliar with the project or spend too much time talking about the applicant's previous work. The best letters make a case for the project's significance, telling evaluators why this is an important project. Finally, applicants get into trouble when they don't plan ahead. You want to make sure that you have enough time to study the guidelines, plan your project, consult with your administration regarding the nomination process on your campus, draft your application, and get feedback from your colleagues. If your application is not funded the first time, we recommend that you reapply. Remember, the level of competition in this program is steep, and we get a lot of applications, so we cannot fund as many as we'd like. We could only fund 10% of our summer stipends applications last year, so don't be discouraged if you get turned down. What you should do instead is ask for your reviewers' comments and read them carefully. If you have trouble understanding those comments, contact a program officer who can help you interpret them. Decisions are final, but we can help you think about a resubmission. And you should resubmit. Our experience is that resubmissions are more likely to be successful the second time around because the applicants have clarified and strengthened their applications. So this brings me to the end of my presentation. As I said at the beginning, if you take nothing else from this presentation, remember that NEH staff are here to answer your questions. Please drop us a line. You can contact me directly at bbragg@neh.gov, or you can contact the program generally at stipends@neh.gov. We will be as helpful as we possibly can. If we can't answer a question, we'll get you someone who can. I thank you for joining me in this webinar and wish you well for your work.